William Henderson stood at the altar of St. Mary's Chapel, his hands trembling as he held the small piece of paper. The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews where nearly 200 people sat in complete silence. His wife Catherine lay in the hospital bed just 3 miles away, fighting a battle that doctors said she was losing. The chapel had been Catherine's favorite place since they moved to the small town of Millbrook 15 years ago. Every Sunday morning, she would drag William here even when he complained about wanting to sleep in. She would sit in the third pew from the front, always on the right side, and sing hymns with a voice so beautiful that other churchgoers would turn their heads to listen. Now that same pew sat empty, and William felt the weight of her absence like a stone in his chest. 3 days earlier, Catherine had asked him to do something that seemed impossible. She wanted him to speak at the chapel's annual memorial service, not about someone who had passed away, but about hope. About finding light in the darkest moments, about believing in miracles even when everything looked hopeless. William had laughed bitterly at first. How could he talk about hope when his wife was dying? How could he speak about miracles when the doctors had given up? But Catherine had taken his hand with her weak fingers and looked at him with those green eyes that had captured his heart 32 years ago. She told him that speaking would help him heal, that sharing their story would give others strength. She said she had been praying for this moment, for a chance to help other people through their own struggles. William had promised her he would try, though he had no idea what he would say. Now standing before the congregation, William felt his voice catch in his throat before he even began. The paper in his hands contained notes he had written the night before, but the words seemed foreign and meaningless. He looked out at the faces staring back at him. There was Mrs. Johnson, whose husband had died in a car accident last winter. There was young Tommy Martinez, whose mother was fighting cancer. There was elderly Mr. Peterson, who lived alone since his children moved away. William cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. He told them about the day he met Catherine at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. He was 22 years old, working as a mechanic and saving money for college. She was 21, studying to become a teacher, with dreams of changing the world one child at a time. She had ordered a complicated coffee drink with extra foam, and when the barista called her name, she accidentally grabbed William's simple black coffee instead. When she realized her mistake and apologized, William found himself saying it was fine, that he liked trying new things. They ended up sitting together for 3 hours, talking about everything from their favorite books to their biggest fears. Catherine had a way of making even the most ordinary moments feel special. She laughed at his terrible jokes and listened carefully when he talked about his dreams of becoming an engineer. As William continued telling their story, his voice grew stronger. He described their wedding day when Catherine wore her grandmother's dress and insisted on writing her own vows. He talked about their struggles to have children, and how Catherine had channeled her love into teaching hundreds of students over the years. He mentioned their quiet life in Millbrook, where Catherine had started a reading program for struggling children and organized food drives for families in need. The congregation listened intently as William shared memories of Catherine's kindness. She was the type of person who remembered everyone's birthday, who brought soup to sick neighbors, and who could make anyone feel important just by giving them her full attention. She had a gift for seeing the best in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. But then William's voice began to falter as he reached the difficult part of the story. 6 months ago, Catherine had started feeling tired all the time. She blamed it on stress from teaching and the long hours she spent volunteering. When she finally went to the doctor, the news changed everything. Advanced pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctor said she had maybe 3 to 6 months to live. William stopped speaking and gripped the podium with both hands. The chapel was so quiet that he could hear the old building settling and the distant sound of cars passing on the street outside. He looked down at his notes, but the words were blurry through his tears. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. He was failing Catherine, failing the promise he had made to her. He couldn't do this. William took a shaky breath and forced himself to continue. The faces in the congregation were filled with compassion, not judgment, and somehow that gave him the courage to keep going. He told them about the day Catherine received her diagnosis, how she had sat in the doctor's office and asked practical questions, while William felt like the world was crumbling around him. She wanted to know about treatment options, about how much time she might have, about what they needed to do to prepare. On the drive home from the hospital, Catherine had been the one comforting William instead of the other way around. She held his hand while he gripped the steering wheel and fought back tears. She told him that they were going to make the most of whatever time they had left. She said she wasn't afraid of dying, but she was afraid of not living fully in the time that remained. That same evening, Catherine had made a list of things she wanted to do. Not dramatic bucket list items like traveling the world or jumping out of airplanes. Instead, she wrote down simple things that mattered to her. She wanted to finish reading to her current class of third graders. She wanted to plant a garden in their backyard and watch it grow through the summer. She wanted to organize all their old photos and create albums for their nieces and nephews. She wanted to have long conversations with friends and family members she hadn't talked to in years. William described how Catherine had approached her illness with the same determination she brought to everything else in her life. She researched treatments and chose the ones that might give her more quality time, even if they couldn't cure her. She continued teaching until the chemotherapy made her too weak to stand in front of a classroom. Even then, she had her students send her drawings and letters, and she would spend hours writing personal responses to each child. The people in the chapel listened as William told them about Catherine's garden. Despite feeling sick from treatments, she had insisted on planting tomatoes, peppers, and flowers in neat rows behind their house. She would sit in a lawn chair on days when she couldn't kneel in the dirt, directing William on where to plant each seed. When the first tomatoes ripened in July, Catherine had cried with joy. She said it proved that beautiful things could still grow, even in the hardest times. William's voice grew softer as he shared more intimate moments from Catherine's illness. There were nights when the pain was so bad that she couldn't sleep, and William would read to her from their favorite books. There were mornings when she felt strong enough to make pancakes, and they would eat breakfast together while watching the sunrise through their kitchen window. There were afternoons when friends would visit, and Catherine would insist on making tea for everyone, even when she could barely lift the kettle. As the months passed, Catherine's body grew weaker, but her spirit seemed to shine brighter. She started writing letters to people who had touched her life, thanking them for their friendship and encouragement. She spent hours on the phone with former students who had grown up and moved away, listening to their stories about jobs and marriages and children. She organized a reunion for her first class of students, now adults in their 30s, and they filled her living room with laughter and memories. William paused again, struggling with the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. He looked out at the congregation and saw that many people were crying quietly. Mrs. Johnson was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Tommy Martinez had his arm around his younger sister. Even Mr. Peterson, who usually maintained a stern expression, was wiping away tears. 2 weeks ago, Catherine had taken a turn for the worse. The doctor said her body was shutting down and she probably had just days left. William had wanted to keep her at home, but she needed more medical care than he could provide. The ambulance ride to the hospital had been one of the hardest moments of his life. Catherine had squeezed his hand and told him she loved him, but they both knew this was likely the beginning of the end. In her hospital room, Catherine had continued to surprise everyone with her strength and grace. Nurses would linger after checking her vital signs, drawn to her warm smile and genuine interest in their lives. She asked about their families, their hobbies, their dreams outside of work. The night shift nurse, Maria, had told William that Catherine was the most peaceful patient she had ever cared for. 3 nights ago, Catherine had asked William to call Pastor Matthews from the chapel. She wanted to have a conversation about the memorial service that was planned for this Sunday. William had assumed she wanted to make requests for her own funeral someday, but Catherine had other plans. She wanted William to speak at the service, to share their story, to help other people find hope in their own struggles. William had protested, saying he wouldn't know what to say, that he wasn't good at public speaking, that he was too emotional to get through it. But Catherine had been insistent. She said God had been preparing her for this moment, giving her a message to share through William's voice. She believed their story could help other people facing impossible situations, showing them that love and hope could survive even when everything seemed lost. William steadied himself against the podium and continued with his story. He told the congregation about yesterday morning when he had arrived at the hospital to find Catherine more alert than she had been in days. Her eyes were bright and she was sitting up in bed eager to talk. She had spent the night thinking about what she wanted William to share at the memorial service, and she had specific messages for different people in their community. Catherine had asked William to bring a notebook so she could dictate her thoughts while she still had the energy. For Mrs. Johnson, she wanted to say that grief was love with nowhere to go, but that didn't mean the love ever disappeared. The connection between her and her husband would always exist even though he was gone. For Tommy Martinez and his family, she wanted them to know that fighting illness was like being a warrior, and warriors deserved honor whether they won or lost their battles. She had messages for the teenagers in their town, reminding them that their lives had value and purpose even when they felt lost or confused. She wanted the elderly residents to know that their wisdom and experience were treasures that shouldn't be hidden away. She had words of encouragement for the single mothers, the struggling families, the people who felt forgotten or overlooked by society. William described how Catherine had spoken for over an hour, her voice growing stronger with each message she wanted to share. It was as if telling him these things was giving her energy instead of draining it. She talked about the power of small kindnesses, how a simple smile or a few words of encouragement could change someone's entire day. She believed that everyone had the ability to be a miracle in someone else's life. Then Catherine had grown quiet and thoughtful. She told William that she had been praying for weeks about their situation, asking God why this was happening to them, why she had to leave him and their life together. But in recent days, her prayers had changed. Instead of asking why, she started asking how she could use this experience to help others. She felt like God was answering that prayer by giving her the opportunity to reach people through William's speech. William's voice cracked as he shared Catherine's most personal thoughts. She had confessed that she was scared, not of dying, but of leaving him alone. She worried about who would take care of him, who would remind him to eat regular meals and go to the doctor for checkups. She was concerned about their nieces and nephews, wondering who would remember to send birthday cards and attend their school plays. She feared that her death would cause William to lose faith in love and goodness. But Catherine had also shared her hopes and dreams for William's future. She wanted him to travel to places they had talked about visiting but never did. She wanted him to learn new skills, maybe take that photography class he had mentioned years ago. She hoped he would make new friends and eventually open his heart to love again, even though that thought was painful for both of them. Most importantly, she wanted him to keep believing in miracles and helping other people find hope. The conversation had exhausted Catherine, and she had fallen asleep holding William's hand. He had sat beside her bed for hours, watching her peaceful face and thinking about everything she had said. He realized that Catherine was still teaching people, still changing lives even from a hospital bed. Her illness hadn't diminished her ability to care for others. It had somehow made her love even more powerful and focused. This morning, William had arrived at the hospital early, planning to spend time with Catherine before coming to the chapel. But the nurses told him she had slept through the night and was still resting comfortably. They encouraged him to keep his commitment to speak at the memorial service, promising to call him immediately if anything changed. Walking away from her room had been one of the hardest things he had ever done. Now, standing before the congregation, William felt the weight of Catherine's trust in him. She believed he could share their story in a way that would help others, and he was determined not to let her down. He looked around the chapel again, seeing faces that had become familiar over the years of Sunday services. These people weren't strangers. They were his community, his extended family. They had celebrated birthdays and anniversaries together, supported each other through losses and difficulties. William began to speak more confidently about the lessons Catherine had taught him through her illness. She had shown him that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite being afraid. She had demonstrated that love could grow stronger when tested by hardship. She had proven that a person's impact on the world wasn't measured by how long they lived, but by how deeply they loved and how many lives they touched. He told the congregation about small moments that had taken on huge significance. The way Catherine still laughed at his jokes even when she felt terrible. How she insisted on lipstick before visitors arrived, wanting to look her best for the people she cared about. The gratitude she expressed for simple pleasures like a cool breeze through the hospital window or her favorite song playing on the radio. William described how Catherine had changed his perspective on what really mattered in life. Before her illness, he had worried about their retirement savings, about fixing things around the house, about staying busy with projects and plans. Now he understood that the most important things couldn't be saved or fixed or planned. Love, kindness, connection, faith, these were the treasures that actually mattered, and they were available to everyone regardless of their circumstances. William felt his phone buzz in his pocket, but he ignored it and continued speaking. He wanted to share Catherine's philosophy about living with terminal illness, something she had explained to him just a few days ago. She said that receiving a death sentence had actually taught her how to truly live. Before her diagnosis, she had spent too much time worrying about the future and dwelling on past mistakes. The cancer had forced her to focus on the present moment, to find joy and meaning in each day she was given. Catherine had compared her situation to being told you only have a limited amount of money to spend. Instead of panicking about running out, she decided to spend each day like it was precious currency, investing in experiences and relationships that brought happiness to herself and others. She had stopped wasting time on things that didn't matter, like keeping a perfectly clean house or following celebrity gossip. Instead, she focused on having meaningful conversations, creating beautiful memories, and expressing love to the people who mattered most. The congregation listened intently as William described Catherine's daily routine in the hospital. Even though she was weak and in pain, she had established a schedule that brought her comfort and purpose. Every morning, she would spend time writing in a journal, recording her thoughts and prayers. She would call or text friends and family members, checking on their lives and offering encouragement. She would read stories to children over video calls, continuing her love of teaching even from her hospital bed. In the afternoons, Catherine would work on what she called her legacy projects. She was writing letters to be opened on future birthdays and anniversaries, ensuring that her love would continue to reach people long after she was gone. She was recording videos with advice and memories for their nieces and nephews, wanting them to know how proud she was of each of them. She was creating a cookbook filled with family recipes and the stories behind them, preserving traditions for future generations. William's voice grew softer as he shared how Catherine had prepared him for life without her. She had made lists of important information he would need, from insurance policies to the names of reliable repair services. But more importantly, she had helped him understand that grief was a natural part of love, and that missing her would be proof of how meaningful their relationship had been. She told him that sadness was the price of having experienced something beautiful. Catherine had also given William specific instructions about how to honor her memory. She didn't want people to focus on her illness or feel sorry for her. Instead, she wanted them to remember her laughter, her kindness, and her belief in the goodness of people. She requested that her funeral be a celebration of life rather than a somber affair, with music and stories that reflected the joy she had found in living. She wanted people to leave feeling inspired to love more deeply and live more fully. William paused and pulled out his phone, which had buzzed several more times. His heart stopped when he saw multiple missed calls from the hospital. His hand shook as he looked at the most recent text message from Nurse Maria. "William, Catherine is asking for you. Please come as soon as possible. She's very weak but alert and wants to see you before." The message ended there, but William understood what it meant. This was likely Catherine's final day, perhaps her final hours. The congregation had noticed his distraction and was watching him with concerned expressions. Pastor Matthews started to move toward the podium, ready to take over if needed. But William looked up at the faces staring back at him and realized what Catherine would want him to do. She would want him to finish what he had started, to complete the message she had trusted him to deliver. The people in this chapel needed to hear the rest of the story, needed to understand the hope that Catherine wanted to share with them. Running to the hospital now wouldn't change what was happening to his wife, but finishing this speech could change lives in the way she had dreamed. William steadied himself and spoke directly to the congregation. He told them about the text message he had just received, about the choice he was facing between rushing to Catherine's bedside and completing his promise to her. He explained that Catherine had always believed in finishing what you started, in keeping commitments even when it was difficult. She had taught him that love sometimes meant making hard choices, putting the needs of others before your own immediate desires. The chapel was completely silent as William continued. He said that Catherine would understand his decision to stay and finish her message. because she knew how important it was to him to keep his word to her. She had trusted him with something precious, the opportunity to help other people find hope in their darkest moments, and he couldn't abandon that responsibility, even now. William described how Catherine had prepared for this moment, knowing that she might not be conscious when the end came. She had already said everything she needed to say to him, had already expressed her love and gratitude for their life together. Yesterday she had told him that she was ready to let go, that she wasn't afraid anymore, because she knew their love would continue even after death separated them physically. The congregation was crying openly now, moved by William's courage and Catherine's faith. Many of them understood the impossible choice he was making, sacrificing his final moments with his wife to honor her wish to help others. It was exactly the kind of selfless decision that Catherine herself would have made, putting the needs of her community before her own desires. William took a deep breath and made a decision that surprised everyone in the chapel, including himself. He looked out at the congregation and said, "Catherine always believed that miracles happened when people came together in love and faith. She taught me that prayer isn't just something you do alone, it's something that becomes more powerful when shared with others. Right now, I think she would want all of us to pray together, not just for her, but for everyone who is facing impossible situations." Without another word, William stepped down from the podium and walked to the front pew where Catherine usually sat. He knelt down on the worn carpet, folded his hands, and closed his eyes. For a moment, the chapel was silent except for the sound of his quiet sobs. Then one by one, the entire congregation began to kneel. Mrs. Johnson moved to the floor beside her pew. Tommy Martinez and his family knelt together. Mr. Peterson slowly lowered himself down, his arthritis making the movement difficult, but his determination unwavering. Within minutes, nearly 200 people were kneeling in prayer, their voices joining together in a whisper that grew stronger and more unified. Some prayed in English, others in Spanish, and a few in languages William didn't recognize. But, somehow, all the voices blended into something beautiful and powerful, like a symphony of hope rising toward the chapel's vaulted ceiling. William found himself praying not just for Catherine but for everyone in the room who was carrying pain. He prayed for Mrs. Johnson's broken heart, for Tommy's mother's healing, for Mr. Peterson's loneliness. He prayed for the teenagers who felt lost, for the parents who worried about their children's futures, for the elderly who feared being forgotten. He realized this was exactly what Catherine had wanted, for their personal tragedy to become a source of connection and hope for others. As the prayer continued, William felt his phone buzz again. This time, it was a call from the hospital. His hands shook as he answered, still kneeling on the chapel floor. Nurse Maria's voice was gentle but urgent. "William, Catherine is asking for you. She's very weak, but she's conscious and alert. She says she has something important to tell you." William looked around at the praying congregation and made another difficult decision. "Maria, can you put the phone up to Catherine's ear? I want her to hear something." The nurse agreed, and William stood up, still holding his phone. He gestured for the congregation to continue praying, but to pray louder so Catherine could hear them from her hospital bed 3 miles away. The voices in the chapel rose together, creating a sound so beautiful and powerful that it seemed to shake the building's foundation. William held his phone high in the air, making sure Catherine could hear every word, every voice, every expression of love and faith from the community she had served for so many years. Tears streamed down his face as he realized that Catherine was experiencing her own miracle, not a cure for her illness, but the knowledge that hundreds of people were surrounding her with love in her final moments. Through the phone, William could hear Nurse Maria crying. She whispered that Catherine was smiling, that tears of joy were rolling down her cheeks as she listened to the prayer. Other hospital staff members had gathered in the room, drawn by the sound of the chapel's prayer coming through the phone's speaker. Even they were crying, moved by the power of a community coming together to support one of their patients. William found his voice again and spoke into the phone, knowing Catherine could hear him. "Catherine, this is your miracle. This is what you wanted to happen. All these people are praying for you, for us, for everyone who needs hope. You did it, sweetheart. You brought everyone together. You're still teaching people, still changing lives, still being the miracle you always were." The prayer continued for several more minutes, with voices joining in from every corner of the chapel. Children who had been fidgeting quietly were now participating with their families. Teenagers who rarely showed emotion were crying openly. Adults who hadn't spoken to each other in years were kneeling side by side, united in their love for Catherine and their desire to support William. Finally, the voices began to quiet, and people slowly returned to their seats. William remained standing at the front of the chapel, still holding his phone. Nurse Maria's voice came through the speaker, loud enough for everyone to hear. "William, Catherine wants me to tell everyone something. She says to tell them that this is the most beautiful sound she's ever heard. She says she's not afraid anymore, because she knows she's surrounded by love. She wants everyone to know that they've given her the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that her life mattered and that love never really dies." The chapel erupted in quiet sobs and expressions of love. People were calling out messages for Catherine, telling her how much she meant to them, how she had touched their lives, how they would never forget her kindness. William repeated each message into the phone, making sure Catherine heard every word of appreciation and love. Nurse Maria continued to relay Catherine's responses. She was thanking everyone for the prayer, for the love, for making her final day so meaningful. She wanted them to know that she felt like the luckiest person in the world to have been part of such a wonderful community. She asked them to take care of William, and to remember that every act of kindness was a way of keeping her spirit alive in the world. Through the phone's speaker, Nurse Maria's voice became softer and more emotional. "Catherine wants to say something directly to all of you. She asked me to repeat her exact words." The chapel fell completely silent as Maria began to speak for Catherine. "Tell them that I can feel their love reaching me here in this hospital room. Tell them that their prayers are like warm light filling my heart. I'm not sad anymore because I know that love this strong never dies. It just changes form." Maria paused, clearly struggling with her own emotions, then continued. "Catherine says she wants everyone to make her a promise. She wants them to look for miracles in ordinary moments. She wants them to be kind to strangers, because you never know what battles people are fighting. She wants them to say, 'I love you' more often, because those words have the power to heal broken hearts and give people strength to keep going." William felt his knees growing weak, but he remained standing, holding the phone steady so everyone could hear. The congregation was completely absorbed in Catherine's message, hanging on every word that came through the speaker. Many people were nodding, silently making the promises Catherine had requested. Nurse Maria's voice continued. "Catherine wants to share something personal with all of you. She says that 6 months ago, when she first learned about her cancer, she felt angry and cheated. She wondered why this was happening to her when she had tried to live a good life. But over these months, she's learned that sometimes the hardest experiences teach us the most important lessons about love and faith, and what really matters." The nurse paused again, and William could hear Catherine's weak voice in the background, giving Maria more words to share. She says that if she could choose, she would want to live for many more years with William. But since that's not possible, she's grateful for every day they've had together. She says their love story isn't ending with her death. It's just moving into a new chapter, where love exists in memories and in the ways William continues to show kindness to others. William looked out at the congregation and saw that everyone was crying, but they were also smiling through their tears. Catherine's words were bringing them comfort and hope, exactly as she had intended. Her message was transforming their grief into something beautiful and meaningful. Through the phone, they could hear Catherine's voice becoming weaker, but Maria continued to relay her words. She wants everyone to know that she's seen angels in this hospital. Not supernatural beings, but ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Nurses who hold patients' hands during the night. Doctors who take extra time to explain things gently. Volunteers who bring therapy dogs to visit. Janitors who learn patients' names and ask about their families. These are the angels that God sends to help us through difficult times. Catherine had one more request, and Maria's voice shook as she delivered it. She wants everyone in the chapel to hug the person next to them and tell them they matter. She says physical touch and kind words are some of God's greatest gifts to humanity, and we don't use them enough. She wants the chapel to be filled with hugs and love while she can still hear it through the phone. Without hesitation, the entire congregation began moving. Families hugged each other first, then reached out to the people in neighboring pews. Mrs. Johnson embraced Tommy Martinez's mother, two women who barely knew each other, but were now connected by their shared experience of fighting cancer. Mr. Peterson, who rarely showed affection to anyone, hugged the teenage boy sitting behind him and told him he was proud of how he was helping his family. Through difficult times, the chapel filled with the sounds of people expressing love and appreciation for each other. Strangers were becoming friends. Isolated individuals were feeling connected, and everyone was experiencing the power of Catherine's message to bring people together. William watched in amazement as his wife's dream of creating unity and hope was happening right before his eyes. Through the phone, Nurse Maria was crying as she described the scene in Catherine's hospital room. "William, she's smiling so big and she's crying happy tears. She says this is exactly what she prayed for. She can hear all the love and connection happening in the chapel, and she says it's the most beautiful music she's ever heard. She's peaceful and happy, knowing that her life has made a difference." The hugging and expressions of love continued for several minutes, with people sharing personal messages of encouragement and support. Children were telling adults they were brave. Adults were telling children they were important. Elderly people were sharing wisdom with younger generations. Everyone was participating in Catherine's vision of a community bound together by love and mutual care. Finally, the chapel began to quiet down as people returned to their seats, but the atmosphere had completely changed. What had started as a memorial service focused on loss and grief had become a celebration of love and connection. Catherine had somehow managed to transform her own dying into an opportunity for healing and hope for hundreds of other people. As the chapel settled into peaceful quiet, Nurse Maria's voice came through the phone one final time. Her words were barely a whisper. "William, Catherine wants to say goodbye to everyone. She asked me to tell you that she can feel herself getting ready to let go. And she's not afraid because she knows she's surrounded by so much love. She wants everyone to know that they've made her last day the most beautiful day of her life." William's voice broke completely as he spoke into the phone. "Catherine, I love you more than words can express. You've been the greatest gift of my life, and you're leaving the world better than you found it. Thank you for teaching me how to love, how to hope, and how to find miracles in ordinary moments. I promise to honor your memory by being kind to others and by never giving up on the power of love." Through the speaker, the congregation could hear Catherine's weak voice saying, "I love you too," to William, followed by her final message to everyone. "Thank you for letting me be part of your lives. Take care of each other. Be angels for people who need hope. Remember that love never dies." The phone line went quiet except for the sound of medical equipment and soft crying from the hospital staff. Nurse Maria came back on the line. "She's sleeping peacefully now, William. Her breathing is very shallow, but she's comfortable and pain-free. The doctor says it probably won't be much longer. Do you want to come now?" William looked out at the congregation one more time. These people had given Catherine the most precious gift imaginable, the knowledge that her life had mattered and that her message of love and hope would continue through them. He knew she would understand if he chose to stay and finish what they had started together. "Maria, please stay with her and keep the phone line open. I want to complete Catherine's message while she can still hear us." William turned back to the congregation and found strength he didn't know he possessed. "Catherine wanted me to end today by asking all of you to make a commitment, not just to remember her, but to live differently because of what you've experienced here." William's voice grew stronger as he shared Catherine's final requests. She wanted everyone to volunteer for something they cared about, to find ways to serve their community just as she had done. She wanted people to reach out to family members they hadn't talked to in too long, to repair broken relationships while there was still time. She wanted everyone to express gratitude more often, to notice the small kindnesses that people showed each day. Most importantly, Catherine wanted everyone to believe in their own ability to be a miracle in someone else's life. She believed that every person in the chapel had unique gifts and talents that could bring hope to others. Whether it was a skill they could teach, a story they could share, or simply a willingness to listen to someone who was struggling, everyone had something valuable to offer. As William spoke, he watched the faces in the congregation transform. People were nodding with determination, already thinking about how they could honor Catherine's requests. Mrs. Johnson was wiping her tears and looking around the chapel with new purpose. Tommy Martinez was holding his mother's hand tighter, his face showing a new understanding of courage. Mr. Peterson was sitting straighter, as if Catherine's words had reminded him of his own value and purpose. William continued with Catherine's message about legacy. She believed that people didn't have to be famous or wealthy to leave a lasting impact on the world. Every teacher who encouraged a struggling student, every neighbor who checked on elderly residents, every parent who showed unconditional love to their children was creating ripples of goodness that would spread far beyond what they could imagine. Through the phone, William could hear the steady beeping of Catherine's heart monitor, growing slower and softer. But her presence felt stronger than ever in the chapel, as if her spirit was filling every corner of the sacred space. The congregation seemed to sense it too, sitting in reverent silence as William delivered her final thoughts. Catherine had asked William to tell everyone about the notebook she had been keeping during her illness. In it, she had written down every act of kindness she witnessed, every moment of beauty she experienced, every reason she found to be grateful despite her circumstances. The notebook was filled with hundreds of entries about hospital staff who went beyond their duties, friends who brought homemade soup, strangers who held doors open, children who shared their artwork. She wanted people to understand that even in the darkest times, there were always reasons to hope if you looked for them. The sunrise through her hospital window, the sound of rain on the roof, the feeling of William's hand in hers. These simple pleasures had sustained her when medical treatments failed. She believed that gratitude was the secret to finding peace in any situation. William's voice grew softer as he shared Catherine's thoughts about death and what comes after. She wasn't certain about all the details of heaven or the afterlife, but she was absolutely certain that love was eternal. The love she felt for William, for their family and friends, for her students and community, that love would continue to exist and influence the world long after her physical body was gone. She had compared death to a graduation, moving from one form of existence to another. Just as a caterpillar doesn't cease to exist when it becomes a butterfly, she believed her death would be a transformation rather than an ending. The love and kindness she had shared during her life would continue to grow and spread through the people she had touched. As William spoke these words, Nurse Maria's voice came through the phone very quietly. "William, her breathing has become very peaceful. The doctor is here and we're all with her. She's not alone." The chapel fell silent, understanding that Catherine was in her final moments. William closed his eyes and spoke directly to his wife through the phone. "Catherine, we're all here with you. 200 people who love you are sending you off with prayers and gratitude. You did it, sweetheart. You showed us how to love better, how to hope stronger, and how to find miracles in ordinary moments. We'll take care of each other, just like you wanted. We'll be the angels you taught us to be." The chapel waited in perfect silence for several long minutes. Finally, Nurse Maria's gentle voice came through the speaker. "She's gone, William." She passed peacefully with a smile on her face. "The last thing she did was squeeze my hand when she heard you talking about angels. She knew you were all here with her." Instead of the devastation William had expected to feel, he experienced something unexpected: profound gratitude. Catherine had gotten exactly what she wanted: to die knowing she was loved, to have her message of hope shared with people who needed it, and to bring her community together in unity and purpose. Her death wasn't a defeat. It was the completion of a beautiful life lived with intention and love. William looked out at the congregation through his tears and saw that they felt it too. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Catherine's legacy would live on through every act of kindness they performed, every moment of hope they shared with others, every time they chose love over fear. She had transformed her own death into a source of life and inspiration for hundreds of people. "Catherine's last prayer has been answered," William said to the congregation. "She wanted her life to matter, to make a difference in the world. Looking at all of you, seeing how her story has touched your hearts and changed your perspectives, I know her prayer was heard. She's not really gone as long as we keep her spirit of love and service alive in our own lives." The memorial service ended not with sadness, but with a commitment. Every person in the chapel promised to carry Catherine's message forward, to be the miracle someone else needed, to never give up on the power of love to transform even the most difficult circumstances. William Henderson had kept his promise to his wife. and in doing so, he had discovered that their love story would continue forever through the lives they had touched together.